All right, let's dive right into this explainer. If you're cramming the night before your exam, or just, setting up your foundational notes, this is designed to be your absolute ultimate revision resource for Young's 2007 study on internet addiction. If you are preparing for your GCSE Edexcel psychology exam, specifically the Psychological Problems booklet, you are exactly in the right place. We're going to break down this landmark study piece by piece, so you have everything you need to know completely locked in your memory.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the exam specs, let's just think about the real world for a second. Can talking therapy actually cure our modern internet addictions? I mean, we've all been there, right? That feeling of endlessly scrolling, completely losing track of time, or maybe even getting a bit anxious when you don't have a Wi-Fi connection. Internet addiction is a very real, very modern problem. And what Young wanted to figure out back in 2007 was whether cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, a really traditional talking therapy, could effectively treat people who had totally lost control of their online habits.
So, to map perfectly to how you're going to be tested, our agenda follows the classic SOTA acronym: aim and sample, procedure, result, and conclusions. And then we'll wrap the whole thing up with a full gray evaluation.
Okay, Section 1, Aim and Sample. Let's look at the start of the SOTA structure.
So Young's primary aim here was really to figure out just how effective CBT would be for people genuinely suffering from internet addiction. To pull this off, she recruited exactly 114 clients. And actually, these weren't just random folks pulled off the street. They were specifically recruited from the Center for Online Addiction over in Pennsylvania in the US. Every single one of these 114 participants had to be screened using the internet addiction test. It's also really important to note that anyone showing extremely high-risk behaviors was actually excluded right from the start, which made sure the study focused on a very specific, standardized baseline of addiction.
Now, the demographic breakdown of those 114 people is highly specific, and you'll want to remember this. We're looking at 42% women and 58% men, mostly spanning their late 30s to mid-40s. But look a little closer at their backgrounds. A massive 84% were Caucasian, and 61% held a 4-year university degree. So we're talking about a very specific, pretty well-educated group here. That is a crucial detail you'll absolutely want to keep in your back pocket for when we evaluate the study later on.
Moving on to Section 2, the procedure. How exactly was this study run? They went with a longitudinal setup here. After that initial screening, the participants did online CBT sessions over a number of weeks with a principal investigator. But, Young needed a solid way to track their progress, so she used a client outcome questionnaire made up of 12 questions. These measures used a 5-point Likert scale, where 0 is not at all helpful and 5 is extremely helpful. And crucially, the clients didn't just fill this out once and forget about it. They filled it out at the 3rd online session, the 8th session, the 12th session, and then again at a 6-month follow-up. They were assessing things like their motivation to quit, their ability to control offline activities, and even the quality of their relationship with their counselor.
Right, Section 3, Results. Let's see what the data actually revealed.
First off, we need to talk about what these clients were actually addicted to, because there's a really fascinating gender divide going on here. Men predominantly struggled with pornography, sexual chat, and gambling, with only a minority reporting an issue with gaming. Women, on the flip side, primarily reported issues with sexual chat, while a minority reported addictions to things like general chat, online auction houses, shopping, and gaming. It just perfectly highlights that internet addiction isn't some one-size-fits-all diagnosis. The actual problematic applications vary heavily from person to person.
And when you look at the negative impacts this addiction had on their lives, it is pretty staggering. I mean, 96% of participants reported time-related problems because of their compulsive use. Just imagine that. Almost every single person in the study felt like the internet was literally stealing their time. Furthermore, 85% reported relationship problems, 75% reported sexual problems, and 71% had serious issues at work. This data clearly proves that compulsive internet use severely damages multiple, really vital areas of a person's real offline life.
Okay, so the big question, did the therapy actually work? Well, the mean ratings show that clients generally found the counseling environment comfortable, and their relationship with the therapist steadily improved over time. But the specific outcomes are really telling. Most clients showed continuous, solid improvement right up to Session 3. By Sessions 8 and 12, they were reporting highly effective symptom management. Just think about this. Engagement in offline activities jumped from a low 2.67 in Session 3 all the way up to 4.87 at the 6-month follow-up. This is massive because it shows that not only did they manage their symptoms during the therapy itself, but they actually maintained that improvement half a year later.
Section 4 now. Conclusions. What's the ultimate takeaway from all this?
Ultimately, Young firmly concluded that CBT and its related techniques were a major success. It genuinely enabled clients to decrease the persistent thoughts and behaviors tied to their compulsive internet use. And it wasn't just a quick fix either. They achieved real relapse prevention over a 6-month period. Clients learned how to reduce the rationalizations that led them to log on in the first place, those excuses we all make to ourselves, and they successfully made proactive lifestyle changes to adapt to a healthy offline life. So in short, online CBT proved to be a highly effective treatment.
Finally, Section 5. Time for the grave evaluation. Let's impartially weigh up the strengths and weaknesses of the study. All right, let's break this down to build your critical argument. Starting with G, generalizability is actually quite low. Remember that demographic data we flagged earlier? These were volunteer participants from just one single center in Pennsylvania. Because they went out of their way to volunteer, they might have been way more motivated to quit compared to your standard addict, which makes it pretty hard to generalize these results to the wider global population. For R, reliability is really high. That 12-question, 5-point Likert scale is a highly standardized tool. It can be super easily replicated by other researchers to see if the results remain consistent over time. For A, the application of this study is fantastic. It literally proves that online CBT is an effective treatment. Since online CBT is generally cheaper and way more accessible than face-to-face therapy, it means future patients can get the support they need much more easily. But for V, validity is unfortunately low. The whole dataset relies heavily on self-report questionnaires. Patients were rating their own confidence. And the thing is, when people report on their own socially sensitive behaviors, they often lie or exaggerate to make themselves look better. Psychologists call this social desirability bias. This means the measurements of their recovery might not be entirely 100% accurate.
And finally, the E in grave, ethics. In psychology, this is always a balancing act between potential harm and ultimate benefits. On the negative side, cognitive behavioral therapy can be, well, pretty distressing. Participants had to dig deep into their home lives and the stressful situations that actively triggered their addictions. Uncovering that can definitely cause temporary psychological harm. However, on the positive side, the long-term benefits were huge. Patients made massive, life-altering improvements in managing their symptoms and reclaiming their time and their relationships. Therefore, you can build a really strong argument that the long-term benefits of the therapy heavily outweigh the temporary distress caused during the sessions.
So there you have it. We've walked through the aim, sample, procedure, results, conclusions, and that full GRAV evaluation. You are now completely equipped to tackle Young's 2007 study on your Edexcel paper. But beyond the exam hall, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. As our digital lives just continue to expand and screens become even more woven into literally everything we do, will online CBT eventually become the universal standard for treating modern addiction? It's a genuinely fascinating question to ponder as you step away from your own screen today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Study hard, and I'll catch you on the next one.